The date is March 24, 1991. Within the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, the grand stage of WrestleMania 7 is alive with fervor, packed to the rafters with 16,000 exuberant wrestling fans. The Big Boss Man, dressed in his iconic blue police uniform and twirling his nightstick, steps into the ring to face Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship. This was no ordinary contest. It was a battle of styles, charisma, and determination, a showcase of what made professional wrestling in the early 1990s an unmissable spectacle. Boss Man wasn't just wrestling Mr. Perfect, he was challenging an era. Mr. Perfect, the slick and arrogant technician, seemed untouchable, while Boss Man, with his everyman demeanor, represented the grit and resolve of working-class America. Their clash wasn't just about a title, it was about principles, pride, and the drama of competition. The match ended in chaos as Haku and the Barbarian stormed the ring to assault Boss Man, leaving him battered but unbroken, victorious by disqualification. Even without claiming the title, his performance cemented his status as one of the Federation's most captivating heroes during its golden era. But triumph is often fleeting. As the Big Boss Man basked in his career's zenith, the tragedy of his later years loomed like a shadow in the distance. A man who had embodied law and order for millions would later find himself struggling with health issues and personal challenges that culminated in his untimely death at just 41 years old. What caused this downward spiral? Was it the physical toll of the wrestling lifestyle, the emotional weight of fading stardom, or something deeper? These are the haunting questions that linger over the legacy of Ray Washington Traylor Jr., known to the world as the Big Boss Man. To understand his story, we must journey back to Paulding County, Georgia, where Traylor's life began. Born on May 2, 1963 in Marietta, Ray grew up with values rooted in hard work and resilience. As a young man, Traylor's imposing size and natural athleticism made him stand out. Graduating high school, Traylor joined the Cobb County Sheriff's Department as a corrections officer, where the harsh realities of the criminal justice system seeped into his consciousness and germinated the authentic roots of his future wrestling persona. His law enforcement experience became the crucible from which the Big Boss Man would emerge, a character forged not from mere performance, but from the first-hand understanding of authority, discipline, and the razor's edge between order and chaos. In 1985, Traylor emerged from the wrestling periphery, transforming from a jobber facing wrestling luminaries to Dusty Rhodes' strategic repackaging as Big Bubba Rogers, a menacing silent bodyguard for Jim Cornette, who rapidly ascended from an emerging talent to a formidable heel. His meteoric rise culminated in a series of legendary bunkhouse stampede matches against Rhodes and a defining Louisville Street Fight victory at Starrcade 1986, establishing him as a wrestler of profound potential and visceral intensity. His big break came when he joined the World Wrestling Federation in 1988. Vince McMahon, always with a keen eye for marketable personas, transformed Traylor into the Big Boss Man, a character inspired by Traylor's stint as a corrections officer. Dressed in his signature uniform and wielding a nightstick, Boss Man was an embodiment of law enforcement during a time when the Federation thrived on larger-than-life characters. He was both feared and admired, a stern enforcer who could command a crowd with a simple glare. In his early Federation days, Boss Man was a villain of the highest order, a brutish disciplinarian who aligned himself with the nefarious Slick. Boss Man transformed post-match rituals into law enforcement theater, systematically subduing and publicly humiliating opponents by handcuffing them to ring ropes and administering punitive beatings. His feuds with Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were not just matches, they were battles of morality. With Boss Man serving as a formidable and cunning adversary, his infamous steel cage match against Hogan in 1989 remains one of the era's most memorable bouts, showcasing Boss Man's ability to combine his raw power with surprising athleticism for a man of his size. He wasn't just a powerhouse, he was a performer who understood how to draw the audience into the drama of a match. In a seismic alliance that reconfigured the wrestling landscape, Boss Man joined Akeem to form the Twin Towers, a devastating tag team that became a pivotal catalyst in the epic Mega Powers dissolution, serving as the narrative fulcrum for the legendary WrestleMania 5 main event between Macho Man and Hulk Hogan. On this same night, the Twin Towers unleashed a brutal assault on the Rockers, then embarked on a summer-long gladiatorial campaign against Demolition, battling ferociously for the tag team championship in a narrative of raw, unrelenting barbarity. But like many great wrestling characters, the Big Boss Man's arc evolved. In a paradigm-shifting moment of moral recalibration, Big Boss Man transcended the mercenary wrestling archetype on the February 24, 1990 episode of Superstars, rejecting the $1 Million Man's blood money and returning Jake Roberts' python-laden bag, thus transforming from heel to face through an act of unexpected integrity. The corrupt cop gimmick gave way to a principled enforcer who stood for justice. After his moral metamorphosis, Boss Man obliterated former partner Akeem in a sub-2-minute WrestleMania 6 evisceration, simultaneously orchestrating a friendship with Hogan. This narrative represented more than a mere character pivot. It was a calculated evolution of wrestling's performative ethics, culminating in his alliance with Hogan, Jim Duggan, and Tugboat at the 1990 Survivor Series. Subsequently, Boss Man embarked on a scorched earth campaign against Bobby Heenan and his family after relentless maternal aspersions, vanquishing Heenan's acolytes with surgical precision, leading to a Royal Rumble triumph over the Barbarian and the aforementioned disqualification victory against Mr. Perfect at WrestleMania 7. Then at SummerSlam, Boss Man engaged in the Federation's sole jailhouse match against the Mountie, emerging victorious in a contest of law enforcement supremacy. In 1992, Big Boss Man feuded with Nails, a vengeful ex-convict character who accused him of prison abuse in pre-debut promos. On Superstars, Nails, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, attacked Boss Man, handcuffing him to the ropes and beating him with a nightstick. After recovering from his kayfabe injuries, Boss Man returned to face Nails in a series of matches, culminating in a nightstick on a pole match at Survivor Series, which Boss Man won. His final pay-per-view appearance came at the 1993 Royal Rumble, where he suffered a loss to Bam Bam Bigelow. As the golden era of wrestling gave way to the grittier, more chaotic Attitude Era, Boss Man's character underwent another transformation, returning to the Federation in 1998 after a 5-year run with World Championship Wrestling. He became a corporate enforcer for Vince McMahon's villainous corporation faction. The once noble officer of the law was now a hired thug, willing to do McMahon's bidding with ruthless efficiency. While some fans lamented this darker turn, it showcased Trailer's ability to adapt and stay relevant in an industry that was rapidly changing. His feuds during this era were as controversial as they were memorable, from tormenting Al Snow with a nightmarish storyline involving Snow's pet dog to facing The Undertaker in the infamous Hell in a Cell match at WrestleMania 15, Boss Man remained a fixture on Federation programming. These moments, while polarizing, demonstrated his willingness to push boundaries and remain a compelling character even as the wrestling landscape shifted dramatically. Yet behind the scenes, the physical and emotional cost of the wrestling lifestyle was beginning to take its toll. Like many of his peers, he struggled with the demands of an industry that often prioritized performance over well-being. In May 2002, Trailer was severely injured in a motorcycle accident after colliding with a deer, leading to a year-long recovery. The ordeal left him physically battered, and his grief deepened with the 2003 passing of his close friend Curt Hennig, a loss that weighed heavily on him. On September 22, 2004, a 41-year-old Trailer succumbed to a heart attack at his home in Dallas, Georgia, leaving a lasting void in the wrestling world. Curt Hennig's untimely death, linked to a fatal mix of cocaine, steroids, and painkillers, underscores professional wrestling's pervasive struggles with substance abuse. Trailer's close bond with Hennig and his own premature passing inevitably raise questions about whether similar factors may have influenced his fate. While such speculation requires sensitivity, examining these issues is vital to understanding the challenges wrestlers face beyond the ring and the systemic pressures that often accompany their careers. Yet regardless of the factors contributing to his tragic early passing, Ray Trailer's legacy endures. The Big Boss Man character remains one of the most iconic personas in wrestling history, a testament to Trailer's talent and charisma. In 2016, he was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, a recognition of his contributions to an industry that he helped shape during its most transformative years. The Big Boss Man may no longer patrol the squared circle, but his memory lives on in the hearts of those who cheered for him, booed him, and ultimately admired the man behind the badge. The date is August 29, 1988. The air inside Madison Square Garden is electric, pulsing with the energy of 20,000 rabid wrestling fans. The inaugural SummerSlam is in full swing, the newest pay-per-view spectacle crafted to showcase the very best of the World Wrestling Federation's golden era. And standing in the center of it all, basking in the cascade of deafening jeers, is Ravishing Rick Rude, the embodiment of arrogance himself, with boos only seem to fuel him, his lips curling into a knowing sneer as he reaches for the microphone. He surveys the crowd, and with calculated disdain, he addresses them. "Cut the music," he commands before launching into his signature tirade against the fat, out-of-shape sweat hogs in attendance. He removes his lavish robe, revealing a body sculpted like a statue of ancient gods, knowing full well that his mere existence provokes both admiration and fury in equal measure. Opposite him stands the Junkyard Dog, a fan favorite with a personality as large as his physical presence. The contrast is stark: Rude, the self-absorbed Adonis, and JYD, the everyman brawler with a heart that beats for the fans. The match begins, and Rude, ever the technician, executes his offense with precision. Every punch, every maneuver is laced with a cocky swagger, a silent reminder that in his mind, he's taunting, flexing, reveling in the ire of the audience. But what happens next cements this moment as quintessential Rick Rude. Midway through the match, in a stroke of theatrical villainy, Rude tugs at his tights and reveals a second pair underneath, this one emblazoned with the face of Jake the Snake, Robert's wife. The sheer audacity of it is breathtaking. The arena erupts, the jeers morphing into something more visceral, more hateful. The psychological warfare is complete, and it doesn't take long before the inevitable happens. A furious Jake Roberts storms the ring, his rage boiling over into uncontrollable vengeance. The match is thrown out. Rude wins by disqualification, but he has achieved something far more valuable than a clean victory. He has cemented his status as one of the most despised men in professional wrestling. This moment was more than just a match. It was a masterclass in character work. Rick Rude didn't just embrace his role as a villain, he elevated it to an art form. He was more than a wrestler. He was a provocateur, a performer who understood that professional wrestling was not just about athleticism, but about eliciting emotion. In an era dominated by larger-than-life heroes, Rude made being bad look good. His persona was intoxicating, a fusion of smug self-assurance and legitimate in-ring brilliance that made him impossible to ignore. But behind the bravado, behind the perfectly sculpted body and the venomous insults, lay a man whose life would take a tragic turn. In 1999, at just 40 years old, Rick Rude tragically passed away. The question lingers: what truly led to the untimely demise of one of wrestling's most captivating figures? To understand, we must look back, beyond the glitz and glamour, to the origins of the man who would become known as Ravishing. Richard Irwin Rude was born on December 7, 1958, in St. Peter, Minnesota. He was a student at Robbinsdale High School, where he shared the halls with future wrestling greats, including Nikita Koloff, Kurt Hennig, Tom Zenk, Brady Boone, John Nord, and Barry Darsow. An extraordinary assembly of talent destined for the squared circle. Among them, his bond with childhood friend Kurt Hennig was particularly deep, a friendship that would endure through their rise in the wrestling world. A natural athlete, he excelled in both football and amateur wrestling. Upon earning a degree in physical education from Anoka Ramsey Community College, Rude briefly navigated the rough-and-tumble world of nightclub security as a bouncer, before testing his mettle in the competitive arena of arm wrestling. But it was professional wrestling that ultimately beckoned him. Under the tutelage of the legendary Eddie Sharkey, the same mastermind who molded the likes of Bob Backlund, the Road Warriors, Sean Waltman, Austin Aries, and Eric Rowan, Rude honed his craft with an intensity befitting his future greatness. He stepped into the ring for the first time in 1982, under the moniker Ricky Rude, a young and unproven babyface tasked with paying his dues. His televised debut came on the November 6, 1982 episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, where he faced the rugged and imposing Joe LeDuc, ultimately falling in defeat, a humbling start to what would become an extraordinary career. Rude began his journey in the squared circle with Vancouver's All-Star Wrestling, before making his way to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and eventually the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association. His official arrival on the national stage came on the May 28, 1983 episode of World Championship Wrestling, where he secured victory over Pat Rose with a well-placed dropkick. A week later, the legendary Gordon Solie conducted an interview with the rising star, during which Rude reflected on his transition from arm wrestling to professional wrestling, emphasizing his deliberate weight loss to enhance agility, an early glimpse of his meticulous dedication. In 1984, he made his triumphant return to Memphis, this time reinvented as Ravishing Rick Rude, an arrogant, self-absorbed heel whose swagger was amplified by the ever-opportunistic Jimmy Hart at his side. His bravado made him an instant antagonist, igniting heated rivalries with Jerry Lawler and later his former ally-turned-adversary, King Kong Bundy. Expanding his reach, Rude debuted in world-class championship wrestling, stepping into battle against the monstrous Kamala in a hard-fought loss before transitioning to Jim Crockett Promotions. There, alongside a revolving door of partners, he waged war against the Road Warriors, one of the most dominant duos in wrestling history. In December 1984, Championship Wrestling from Florida brought in Rude, pairing him with the cunning Percy Pringle as his manager. His rise was swift, as on January 16, 1985, he overpowered Pez Whatley to claim the Florida Southern Heavyweight Championship. However, his reign was cut short on April 10th, when Brian Blair wrested the title from him. Undeterred, Rude reclaimed the gold on July 20th, defeating Mike Graham in the finals of a Southern title tournament. His second run lasted until October 2nd, when he fell to Wahoo McDaniel, the man shaping Florida's booking at the time. Beyond singles gold, Rude found success in the tag team ranks alongside Jesse Barr. On April 16, 1985, the duo seized the Florida United States Tag Team Championship, igniting a fierce rivalry with Billy Jack Haynes and Wahoo McDaniel. Their battles raged until July 9th, when McDaniel and Haynes pried the belts from their grasp, closing the chapter on Rude's eventful run in Florida. In October of 1985, Rude stormed into world-class championship wrestling alongside Percy Pringle, immediately clashing with Kevin Von Erich and Chris Adams. His impact was undeniable, as by November 4th he had captured the American Heavyweight Championship, solidifying himself as a top star in the territory. After dropping the title to Chris Adams in July 1986, tensions boiled over. Rude unceremoniously dumped Pringle, replacing him, albeit briefly, with his sister Raven. He then formed a powerhouse duo with the Dingo Warrior, but the alliance was short-lived as Warrior ultimately betrayed him, embracing the fans and forging his own legend. In September 1986, Rude made his return to Jim Crockett Promotions, aligning with the rugged Manny Fernandez and their devious manager Paul Jones to wage war against Wahoo McDaniel. Together, Rude and Fernandez, dubbed the Awesome Twosome, quickly made their mark. On December 6, 1986, they dethroned the Rock and Roll Express to claim the prestigious World Tag Team Championship, cementing themselves as one of the most dominant duos in the promotion. Their reign was fierce but short-lived. In April 1987, Rude abruptly made his exit for the World Wrestling Federation, forcing Jim Crockett Jr. to scramble for an explanation. In a clever bit of storytelling, the promotion aired a pre-taped, non-title match where the Rock and Roll Express emerged victorious, with the narrative spun that Rude had suffered an injury, an excuse that masked his high-profile jump to Vince McMahon's empire. Rick Rude made his grand entrance in the Federation on July 15, 1987, debuting on Superstars of Wrestling as the newest and most arrogant member of the Bobby Heenan family. With Heenan in his corner, Rude immediately set his sights on Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. What followed was a heated battle of egos, as Orndorff sought to prove he was still the dominant force, while Rude aimed to establish himself as Heenan's new crown jewel. Their rivalry reached its climax inside the hallowed halls of Madison Square Garden, where Rude triumphed over Orndorff, solidifying his place as one of the Federation's fastest-rising villains. Rude then kicked off 1988 with a bold challenge, stepping into the Boston Garden on January 9th to face Hulk Hogan for the World Heavyweight Championship. Though he fell short in dethroning the Hulkster, this was merely the prelude to one of his most iconic feuds, his war with Jake the Snake Roberts. A master of mind games and arrogance, Rude perfected a pre-match ritual designed to enrage the audience. With theatrical flair, he would slowly remove his robe after berating the local crowd, branding the men as fat, out-of-shape sweat hogs. Oftentimes, he took his arrogance a step further, selecting a lucky woman from the audience, courtesy of Bobby Heenan, and sealing the moment with a smug, show-stealing kiss. One of Rude's most infamous trademarks was his custom airbrushed tights, each pair a canvas for his conceitful taunting. But in his bitter feud with Jake the Snake Roberts, those tights became a weapon of pure humiliation. In a moment that blurred reality and storyline, Rude unknowingly attempted to seduce Roberts' real-life wife, Cheryl, during his pre-match routine. When she rejected his advances and revealed she was there for the Snake, Rude's ego took a hit. Enraged, especially after Cheryl slapped him, he grabbed her wrist and berated her on the microphone. That was all the provocation Roberts needed, as he stormed out of the dressing room and erupted into a brawl with Rude. Days later, Rude delivered his ultimate insult. He strutted to the ring, wearing tights airbrushed with Cheryl's face, a move designed to enrage Roberts beyond reason. Soon a furious Snake hit the ring like a man possessed, attacking Rude and tearing off his tights. For television audiences, the Federation censored Rude's lower half with a blacked-out spot, creating the illusion that he had been left completely exposed. But for the live crowd, the reality was slightly less scandalous, with Rude having been stripped down to nothing but a G-string. By mid-1988, Rude had fully embraced his mind games, making a habit of wearing a second pair of tights beneath the ones he entered the ring with, always saving a shocking reveal for the perfect moment. As highlighted earlier, at the inaugural SummerSlam, he took this tactic to another level during his match against the Junkyard Dog. As Rude was perched on the top turnbuckle, he peeled off his outer tights to expose a second pair, this time featuring Cheryl Roberts' face. The blatant disrespect sent Jake the Snake Roberts into a frenzy. Chaos, the referee disqualified Junkyard Dog, handing Rude the victory. Their rivalry raged on, culminating in a Rude Awakening versus DDT match at Madison Square Garden, where Roberts emerged victorious. The final chapter came at the 1988 Survivor Series, when Roberts put an emphatic end to their war, dropping Rude with a DDT and pinning him clean. Rude's next spiteful saga erupted with the Ultimate Warrior, a clash of power, ego, and raw intensity. The feud ignited at the 1989 Royal Rumble, where the two met in a super pose down, a contest designed to showcase their chiseled physiques. Warrior, the fan favorite, had the crowd firmly in his corner, much to Rude's growing frustration. When it became clear he was losing the popularity battle, Rude snapped. In a moment of calculated brutality, he blindsided Warrior, smashing him across the back with a steel pose bar. The attack left Warrior writhing in pain and set the stage for one of the most heated rivalries of the year. This led to a high-stakes Intercontinental Championship match at WrestleMania 5 with the Ultimate Warrior defending his title against the cunning Rude. The match erupted before it even began, as Rude attempted a sneak attack, only to injure his knee on the Warrior's unyielding championship belt. What followed was a brutal back and forth, with Rude using every dirty trick in the book, from missile dropkicks to jawbreakers, but the Warrior seemed impervious to his offense. However, after a dramatic turn of events, it was Heenan's interference that allowed Rude to capitalize and claim the belt, securing the pinfall on the weakened Warrior. Although it wasn't long before Warrior would extract his revenge at SummerSlam. During the match, the Warrior dominated early, launching Rude with a press slam onto the arena floor and using the Intercontinental belt in a relentless assault, until Rude regained control with a well-timed counter. However, a timely distraction from Roddy Piper, who flashed Rude with his kilt, gave the Warrior the opening he needed, leading to a German suplex, press slam, Warrior splash, and a victorious pinfall, making him the new Intercontinental Champion. Rude then set his sights on Piper, culminating in a heated clash at the 1989 Survivor Series, where their teams collided in a chaotic battle. The rivalry raged on with several encounters, including a steel cage match at Madison Square Garden, where Rude found himself on the losing end of most bouts. He briefly turned his attention to Jimmy Snuka, securing a victory over him at WrestleMania 6, before his focus shifted once more. In the summer of 1990, Rude reignited his rivalry with the Ultimate Warrior, following Warrior's triumph as Federation Champion. Determined to claim the title, Rude embraced an intense training regimen, cutting ties with distractions, forsaking women, and opting for a more disciplined short-haired look that would define his later years. The culmination of this personal transformation came at SummerSlam, where the two collided in a brutal steel cage match. But despite Rude's preparations, the Warrior emerged victorious once again. Rude's next scheduled feud was with the Big Boss Man. sparked by his manager Bobby Heenan's inflammatory remarks about Boss Man's mother. Rude eagerly backed up these insults, challenging the Boss Man to a showdown. Scheduled for a Survivor Series match as part of the Natural Disasters, alongside Earthquake, Dino Bravo, and the Barbarian, Rude was unexpectedly replaced by Haku after being suspended indefinitely by Jack Tunney. Tunney explained that the suspension was a result of Rude's disrespectful comments, with Heenan being forced to step in and face the Boss Man. In reality, Rude's departure was prompted by an escalating dispute with Federation owner Vince McMahon, leading to his exit from the company. After leaving the Federation, Rude sought to join the Universal Wrestling Federation, but his former employer quickly intervened, sending a cease and desist order that blocked his appearance on television while still under contract. It wasn't until May 1991, at the Spring Spectacular 2, that Rude made his in-ring return, facing Paul Orndorff and losing by disqualification. 2 months later, he ventured overseas to All Japan Pro Wrestling for their Summer Action Series, making his debut in Yokosuka, Japan, where he formed a successful partnership with Johnny Ace, defeating Billy Black and Joel Deaton. Rude remained undefeated in singles matches, claiming victories over Isamu Teranishi and Akira Taue, before wrapping up his tour with a loss alongside Johnny Ace to Dan Spivey and Stan Hansen. Rude also made notable appearances in International World Class Championship Wrestling, engaging in a feud with the Honky Tonk Man. In late 1991, Rude made his return to World Championship Wrestling, which had been sold to Ted Turner in late 1988. His reappearance at Halloween Havoc was shrouded in mystery as he donned the mask of the Phantom, only to reveal his identity later that evening. Rude quickly established himself as a force, leading the Dangerous Alliance, a faction that included Medusa, Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, and stunning Steve Austin. Rude claimed the United States Heavyweight Championship from Sting on November 19, 1991, and embarked on a series of intense rivalries, including a feud with Ricky Steamboat, during which Steamboat suffered a kayfabe broken nose in a brutal gang attack. In 1992, Rude and Medusa parted ways with the Dangerous Alliance to feud with Nikita Koloff. Rude, who had set his sights on the World Heavyweight Championship, challenged Ron Simmons multiple times but never captured the title. And in December, Rude sustained a legitimate neck injury, forcing him to forfeit the United States Championship and ending a historic 14-month reign, the second longest in the title's history. Rude returned to action in April 1993, seeking to reclaim the title from Dustin Rhodes, who had won it in his absence. Their rivalry, marked by controversial finishes, culminated in a 30-minute Iron Man match at Beach Blast, which ended in a draw, leading to a best-of-3 series. Rude won the first match, but was then defeated twice by Rhodes, ultimately losing his chance to regain the United States Heavyweight Championship. Next, Rude set his sights on the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, making a bold statement during Ric Flair's A Flair for the Gold segment. He defeated Flair for the title at Fall Brawl that September, but when WCW severed ties with the NWA, the company introduced the International World Heavyweight Championship. Rude briefly held this title, losing it to Hiroshi Hase in Tokyo before regaining it a week later in Kyoto. After a string of title changes, a serious back injury sustained during a match with Sting led to Rude's retirement shortly after being stripped of the championship. After collecting on a Lloyd's of London insurance policy, Rude remained absent from wrestling until January 1997, when he resurfaced in Extreme Championship Wrestling as a masked figure. His debut at House Party saw him declare his intention to mess with the franchise, and he spent the following months tormenting Shane Douglas, even spanking his valet Francine during crossing the line again. Rude eventually unmasked, transitioning to a color commentator role before briefly aligning with Douglas and his Triple Threat faction. In the main event of Heatwave, Rude made a one-off return to the ring in a 6-man tag, only to betray his partners, Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman, later aiding Jerry Lawler in defeating them. In August of 1997, Rude made his return to the World Wrestling Federation, aligning himself as the insurance policy for the faction that would come to be known as D-Generation X, alongside Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna. While Rude never wrestled as a member of DX, he played an integral role, standing ringside during the group's matches. Just days after the controversial Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series, Rude departed the Federation once again. According to Bret Hart, Rude stayed in the locker room during Hart's confrontation with Vince McMahon and later informed Eric Bischoff that the events were genuine. Though Rude was not under a full-time contract with the Federation, working instead on a pay-per-appearance basis, his anger over the screw job led him to negotiate a deal with Bischoff and World Championship Wrestling. On November 17, 1997, Rude made history by appearing on both Raw is War and Monday Nitro in the same night. On Nitro, with a mustache, Rude harshly criticized Vince McMahon, Shawn Michaels, DX, and the Federation, referring to the company as the Titanic, a pointed jab at Titan Sports, the Federation's parent company at the time. Just an hour later, Rude appeared on Raw is War, now sporting the full beard he had worn in his final weeks with the Federation. Over that same weekend, Rude made an appearance on Extreme Championship Wrestling's Hardcore TV, further blurring the lines between the promotions, as the Federation and ECW often collaborated in talent exchanges. In WCW, Rude joined the New World Order, managing his close friend Curt Hennig and becoming the first wrestler to be part of both DX and NWO. When the NWO splintered in May 1998, Rude and Hennig initially aligned with the Wolfpack, but their time with the faction was short-lived. At the Great American Bash, they betrayed Wolfpack member Conan after his loss to the undefeated Goldberg, leading them to join NWO Hollywood. By the end of 1998, both men were sidelined with injuries, Hennig suffering from a persistent leg injury, and Rude initially thought to have testicular cancer, later diagnosed with a spermatocele. Hennig returned to the NWO at Starrcade, but Rude remained absent due to his health issues, ultimately leaving the promotion in April 1999 after his final appearance on the April 5th edition of Monday Nitro Backstage Blast. Just over 2 weeks later, on April 20th, 1999, Rude was found unconscious by his wife and tragically passed away at the age of 40 from heart failure. The cause was seemingly a lethal mix of prescription painkillers and anabolic steroids, a cocktail all too familiar in the world of professional wrestling. At the time, Rude had been actively training for a return to the ring. It was later speculated that the effects of gamma-hydroxybutyrate, a drug used to treat narcolepsy, may have played a role in his untimely passing. The legacy of Ravishing Rick Rude is one of brilliance and tragedy. He was, without question, one of the greatest villains the business has ever seen. A man who understood, perhaps better than anyone, how to manipulate an audience, how to make them feel, how to make them hate him. His matches, his promos, his very presence demanded attention. He was, in every sense of the word, ravishing. And beneath the bombastic exterior was a man of unshakable grit. Rude wasn't just a pretty face with a sculpted physique. He was a relentless worker, his training regimen forging an iron grip that could humble the toughest challengers. And when provoked, he didn't hesitate to back up his words with his fists. In one infamous backstage clash, Rude is said to have dropped the Ultimate Warrior with a single punch, proof that the Ravishing One was every bit as dangerous as he was charismatic. The late great Paul Bearer, then known as Percy Pringle, once revealed one of Rick Rude's more peculiar indulgences. As recounted by Bruce Pritchard on Something to Wrestle, Rude and his girlfriend would frequent bars, but not just for drinks. He took a twisted pleasure in watching other men hit on her, knowing full well what came next. The moment some poor fool took the bait, Rude would step in, eager to turn the flirtation into a full-blown brawl. For him, it wasn't just about proving a point, it was about the thrill of domination. And then there's also the tale where one night, despite nursing an injured arm, Rude joined his WCW crew for a night out. When a bouncer foolishly dismissed the wrestlers as phonies, Rude didn't just put him in his place, he dropped him. And to drive the point home, he did it with his injured arm, proving that even at half strength, he was more than most men could handle. After Rude's passing, Bret Hart said, "Rick Rude was anything but rude. In any circle of friends and phonies, you take the good with the bad, and the bad makes you appreciate the good even more." At the height of my road days, when 300 flights in 300 towns a year was normal, strangers became family and family became strangers. You can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. Rick Rude was one of the best picks I ever made. He was a great family man. He loved his wife. He was one of those kind of guys who never took his wedding ring off. He put a white piece of tape around it when he went into the ring. He was the kind of guy that when you needed someone to back you up, he wouldn't flinch at all. Not for money, not for anything. In 2017, Rude was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, cementing his legacy as one of the most iconic figures in professional wrestling history. But the tragedy of his death lingers, a cruel punctuation mark on a career that deserved a far greater epilogue. Rick Rude was one of a kind, a performer whose impact far outlived his time in the ring. He was arrogance personified, a villain in the purest sense, and yet decades later, his legacy is one of admiration. Because deep down, even as we booed, even as we jeered, we knew that we were watching a master at work. May he rest in peace. The date is March 27th, 1988. The electric atmosphere of Trump Plaza in Atlantic City crackles with anticipation as two titans of professional wrestling prepare to collide before 19,000 ardent fans. In one corner stands the $1 Million Man, dripping with arrogance and ill-gotten wealth. In the other, a figure whose very presence commands attention, with his trademark raspy voice, his signature sunglasses gleaming under the arena lights. Here is the Macho Man, Randy Savage. This is much more than just another match at WrestleMania 4. It is the culmination of a tournament to crown a new Federation World Heavyweight Champion, and Savage is about to ascend to wrestling immortality. At his side stands Miss Elizabeth, the epitome of grace amid the chaos of professional wrestling, her presence lending an air of sophistication to Savage's controlled fury. The image of Savage hoisting Elizabeth onto his shoulder after securing victory will become iconic, a perfect snapshot of wrestling's golden age, capturing both its theatricality and its underlying humanity. Yet beneath the glitter and glory of that triumphant moment lay the seeds of a darker tale. Both Savage and Elizabeth would leave this world far too soon, he at 58, she at just 42. Their stories, intertwined in both triumph and tragedy, raise questions that still haunt wrestling fans today. What price does one pay for greatness? What demons lurk behind the pyrotechnics and pageantry? To understand the man who became Macho, we must first meet Randy Mario Poffo, born on November 15, 1952, in Columbus, Ohio. Wrestling wasn't just a career choice for Randy, it was the family business. His father, Angelo Poffo, was a well-known wrestler in his own right, and young Randy grew up watching his father battle in smoke-filled arenas across the Midwest. But Randy's first love wasn't the squared circle, it was baseball. Signed by the St. Louis Cardinals as a catcher straight out of high school, Randy quickly found himself adapting to life in the minor leagues, primarily as an outfielder in the Cardinals and Reds farm systems. At just 18, he shared a locker room with future Major League player Larry Herndon, who later adopted Savage's unorthodox training method of strengthening his swing by pounding a hanging car tire. A devastating shoulder injury forced Poffo to relearn throwing with his left arm, a testament to his relentless determination. After 4 seasons and 289 games, he had compiled a .254 batting average, 16 home runs, and 129 runs batted in. But when baseball didn't pan out, Randy turned to his birthright. During the baseball offseason of 1973, Savage took his first steps into professional wrestling, debuting under the masked persona of the Spider, a nod to the legendary comic book hero. But it wasn't long before his raw intensity demanded a name that matched his ferocity. At the urging of his friend and trainer, Terry the Goose Stevens, and Booker Ole Anderson, who remarked that he wrestled like a savage, Randy Poffo was reborn as Randy Savage, a moniker that would eventually become synonymous with electrifying charisma and unrelenting intensity. Savage made his in-ring debut against Midwest Territory veteran Golden Boy Paul Christie. Teaming with his father and brother, he carved his path through the various wrestling circuits, honing his craft in the unforgiving world of regional wrestling. Frustrated by the lack of pushes for his sons, Angelo Poffo took matters into his own hands, launching the Renegade International Championship Wrestling promotion across the mid-American states. Defiant and unaligned with the wrestling establishment, the promotion waged war against the territory system until its eventual collapse. With their promotion in ruins, Randy and Lanny had no choice but to cross enemy lines, entering the Memphis scene and joining forces with Jerry Lawler's Continental Wrestling Association. In Memphis, Savage ignited a heated rivalry with Lawler over the coveted Southern Heavyweight Championship. Alongside his brother Lanny, he also waged war against the Rock and Roll Express, a battle that reached its boiling point on June 25, 1984. That night, in a moment etched into wrestling infamy, Savage brutalized Ricky Morton, delivering a vicious pile driver through the timekeeper's table. By late 1984, Savage shocked the Memphis wrestling scene by turning babyface, forging an uneasy alliance with Lawler to battle Jimmy Hart's ruthless First Family. But true to his unpredictable nature, Savage betrayed Lawler once again in early 1985, reigniting their fierce rivalry over the championship. Their war reached its climax when Lawler finally vanquished Savage in a high-stakes loser-leaves-town match, forcing the Macho Man to bid farewell to the territory. Subsequently, in June of 1985, Vince McMahon secured one of wrestling's most electrifying talents, signing Randy Savage to the World Wrestling Federation. Making his debut on Championship Wrestling on July 6th, he swiftly dismantled Aldo Marino, a statement victory that marked the arrival of a future icon. Branded as the top free agent in professional wrestling, Savage became the hottest commodity in the sport, with legendary managers including Bobby the Brain Heenan, Jimmy Hart, Mr. Fuji, Johnny Valiant, and classy Freddie Blassie, all vying to guide his career. After rejecting their advances, Savage introduced Miss Elizabeth as his manager, a striking contrast to his own unhinged intensity. Portraying a volatile, egomaniacal bully, Savage exuded dominance both in and out of the ring, treating Elizabeth with unsettling possessiveness while daring anyone to even glance in her direction. This explosive dynamic not only made him one of the most compelling villains in wrestling, but also laid the foundation for one of the most iconic partnerships in the history of sports entertainment. Savage's pay-per-view debut came on November 7th at the Wrestling Classic, where he tore through the competition in a grueling 16-man tournament. Showcasing his unmatched athleticism and cunning, he defeated Ivan Putski, outlasted the legendary Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and overcame the relentless Dynamite Kid. But in the finals, victory slipped through his grasp as he fell to Junkyard Dog via countout. By late 1985, Savage set his sights on the prestigious Intercontinental Heavyweight Championship, targeting reigning champion Tito Santana in a heated rivalry. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, he came agonizingly close to claiming the gold, outmaneuvering Santana and securing a countout victory. But the triumph was hollow, as the championship remained with Santana, as titles could not change hands under such circumstances. But in their highly anticipated rematch at the Boston Garden, Savage at last seized the Intercontinental belt through sheer cunning. Concealing a foreign object within his tights, he struck with precision, rendering Santana unconscious and securing the victory in a display of calculated deception. In the early chapters of his Federation tenure, Savage also notched 3 countout victories over none other than World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, 1 at the Philadelphia Spectrum and 2 within the hallowed halls of Madison Square Garden. Though the championship remained in Hogan's grasp due to the countout rulings, these battles foreshadowed their future alliance. Simultaneously, Savage waged fierce rivalries against the legendary Bruno Sammartino and the unpredictable George the Animal Steele. Savage's bitter vendetta with Steele ignited on Saturday Night's Main Event, when the wild and unhinged Steele became infatuated with Miss Elizabeth, much to Savage's jealous fury. Their clash reached its first crescendo at WrestleMania 2, where Savage defended his Intercontinental Championship against Steele's unpredictable offense. The feud resumed in early 1987, culminating in 2 more championship battles, both of which saw Savage outmaneuver his unorthodox adversary. Next, Savage engaged in what many consider one of the greatest feuds in wrestling history with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Their bout at the 3rd installment of WrestleMania in front of 90,000 fans remains a masterpiece of in-ring psychology and technical excellence. After a relentless exchange that saw 19 near falls, Steamboat, assisted by George Steele, who sent Savage crashing from the top rope, secured the pinfall victory, bringing an end to Savage's nearly 14-month reign as Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion. The bout is still studied by wrestlers today as a perfect example of how to tell a story through athletic competition. Unlike the improvised call-it-in-the-ring style typical of the era, this match was meticulously choreographed. Every sequence, every movement rehearsed to impeccability. Savage, a perfectionist to his core, worked tirelessly with Steamboat to devise what would earn Match of the Year honors from both Pro Wrestling Illustrated and The Wrestling Observer. In September 1987, Savage emerged the victor of the King of the Ring tournament. His undeniable charisma and electrifying performances had begun to sway the crowd, and despite his heel status, the cheers grew louder. Sensing the shift, he softened his antagonism toward both the fans and Miss Elizabeth, signaling a transformation. When the Honky Tonk Man arrogantly proclaimed himself the greatest intercontinental heavyweight champion of all time, Savage took offense, sparking a nasty rivalry to reclaim the title. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, Savage finally got his shot at the Honky Tonk Man and the Intercontinental belt. However, just as victory seemed within reach, the Hart Foundation intervened, causing a disqualification. What followed was a ruthless assault on Savage, leaving him outnumbered and vulnerable. But in a moment that would change wrestling history, Miss Elizabeth rushed backstage and returned with Hulk Hogan, who stormed the ring to even the odds. This dramatic rescue marked the birth of the Mega Powers. The next month, at the inaugural Survivor Series, Savage led a powerhouse team into battle against the Honky Tonk Man and his allies, determined to settle the score. Savage's team emerged victorious, but his war with Honky was far from over. Their rivalry stretched into early 1988, culminating in a final high-profile clash on the main event. In their last major showdown, Savage sent a message loud and clear, shoving Honky away from Elizabeth and into the unforgiving ring post, securing a count-out victory and putting an emphatic end to their bitter feud. As highlighted earlier, at WrestleMania 4, Savage entered the grueling 14-man tournament to crown a new World Heavyweight Champion. He fought his way through a gauntlet of tough contenders, defeating Butch Reed, Greg the Hammer Valentine, and the monstrous one-man gang to reach the finals. There, he faced off against the $1 Million Man, who had the towering Andre the Giant in his corner. But when the odds seemed stacked against him, Hulk Hogan intervened, helping Savage score the pinfall to claim his first Federation World Heavyweight Championship. For over a year, Savage stood atop the wrestling world, defending his title against formidable challengers like One Man Gang, Big Boss Man, and even Andre the Giant, cementing his reign as one of the most dominant champions of his era. The Mega Powers then began their first major rivalry against the Mega Bucks, the formidable duo of the $1 Million Man and Andre the Giant. Their clash headlined the historic first-ever SummerSlam on August 29, 1988, with the legendary Jesse the Body Ventura officiating. The match's defining moment came in its final minutes, when Miss Elizabeth shocked the crowd by stepping onto the apron and dramatically removing her skirt, revealing red panties beneath. The distraction was enough to turn the tide, allowing Savage and Hogan, who had been sent to the outside, to re-enter the ring. Seizing the opportunity, Savage forced a hesitant Ventura into making the decisive 3 count, sealing the victory and solidifying the Mega Powers' dominance on one of wrestling's biggest stages. The Mega Powers soon found themselves locked in battle with the Twin Towers, the monstrous alliance of Big Boss Man and Akeem. As tensions escalated, Savage and Hogan frequently intervened in each other's matches, ensuring neither faced the towering duo alone. Their war reached a boiling point in November of 1988 at Survivor Series, where both factions captained opposing teams in a high-stakes main event. In a war of power and strategy, the Mega Powers overcame the odds, emerging victorious and further establishing themselves as the most dominant force in the Federation. But beneath the surface, cracks in their alliance were beginning to form, foreshadowing a seismic shift that would change everything. By early 1989, tension between Savage and Hogan began to simmer, fueled by Hogan's growing closeness to Miss Elizabeth, who had now taken on managerial duties for both men. The cracks widened at the Royal Rumble when a moment of miscommunication turned into a full-blown confrontation. In the heat of the match, Hogan accidentally eliminated Savage, triggering a furious standoff between the two. The tension was palpable as emotions flared, and it took Miss Elizabeth herself stepping between them to prevent an all-out brawl. The breaking point for the Mega Powers came in February when Savage and Hogan took on the Twin Towers. In a fateful incident at ringside, Miss Elizabeth was accidentally injured, and Hogan, in a moment of instinct, carried her to the back for medical attention, leaving Savage alone in the ring. When Hogan returned, he found a man transformed by fury. Savage, seething with jealousy and betrayal, abandoned Hogan mid-match, letting his emotions take control. Backstage, their partnership exploded into a heated confrontation, with Savage accusing Hogan of trying to steal Elizabeth and declaring himself the superior wrestler. Then, in a shocking act of rage, Savage attacked his longtime ally, even turning his fury on Brutus the Barber Beefcake when he tried to intervene. Security had to separate them, but the message was clear. Savage had officially turned heel, shattering the Mega Powers once and for all. At WrestleMania 5, Savage relinquished the World Heavyweight Championship to Hogan after a 371-day reign. In a display of grit, Savage, despite being hospitalized with a severe elbow infection, discharged himself to honor the match. His arm wrapped in a heavy bandage and weakened by the infection, Savage still managed to deliver a rousing performance. Later that month, following the fallout with Miss Elizabeth, who remained by Hogan's side, Savage enlisted the help of former women's champion Sensational Sherri as his new manager. At SummerSlam, Savage co-headlined the event, teaming with the human wrecking machine Zeus, portrayed by actor Tiny Lister in his role from No Holds Barred, to face the Megamaniacs of Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. Despite Savage's cunning, the Megamaniacs triumphed after Hogan struck Zeus with Sherri's loaded purse. The two rivals collided once more at No Holds Barred in a steel cage rematch. But once again, Savage and Zeus were vanquished. Amidst the chaos, Savage set his sights on New Gold, challenging Jim Duggan for the King of the Ring title. Emerging victorious, he rebranded himself as the Macho King, embracing his new royal persona with grandiosity. By his side, Sensational Sherri adopted the moniker Queen Sherri. Savage and Hogan clashed one final time in early 1990 at the main event, with Hogan's championship once again at stake. In a controversial finish, newly crowned heavyweight boxing champion Buster Douglas, serving as the special enforcer, counted the pinfall despite Savage kicking out at 2. Outraged, Savage confronted Douglas, slapping the boxing champion in defiance, only to be met with a thunderous blow in retaliation. Savage soon found himself embroiled in a rivalry with the charismatic common man, Dusty Rhodes. At WrestleMania 6, he and Sensational Sherri suffered an embarrassing defeat in a mixed tag match against Rhodes and Sapphire. However, the Macho King evened the score at SummerSlam, securing a hard-fought singles victory over Rhodes and proving that his royal reign was far from over. Next, Savage set his sights on the new Federation champion, the Ultimate Warrior, who had dethroned Hogan at WrestleMania 6. However, Warrior repeatedly denied the Macho King a title shot, opting instead to defend the championship against Sergeant Slaughter at the Royal Rumble in January 1991. Enraged, Savage ambushed Warrior during his entrance and later struck the decisive blow, shattering his royal scepter over Warrior's skull, rendering him unconscious and costing him the championship. In retaliation, Warrior issued a bold challenge, a career-ending match at WrestleMania 7, where the loser would be forced into retirement. In a grueling battle, Savage fell short, and as he lay broken in the ring, Sensational Sherri, seeing no further use for him, ruthlessly attacked him. But from the crowd emerged Miss Elizabeth, who, unable to watch any longer, rushed to the ring, drove Sherri away, and embraced Savage in an emotional reunion. And for the first time since 1989, the Macho Man once again became a beloved fan favorite. Despite his in-ring retirement, Savage remained with the Federation in a non-wrestling role, while the Ultimate Warrior was unceremoniously fired by Vince McMahon after SummerSlam later that year. However, Savage quietly continued to wrestle on select occasions, with the Federation's official story claiming that Warrior had graciously allowed him to finish out the remainder of his contract before stepping away. His final match took place on April 1st in Kobe, Japan, where he fell to Genichiro Tenryu at a Super World Sports event. Yet, retirement proved fleeting. On July 30th, in an untelevised bout at a Wrestling Challenge taping in Portland, Maine, Savage made a surprise return, stepping in for Warrior to defeat The Undertaker. He continued to fill in for Warrior throughout early August, facing Undertaker on the house show circuit. Savage's story with Miss Elizabeth reached its emotional peak when he proposed to her in the ring, leading to their highly publicized on-air wedding at SummerSlam on August 26, 1991, billed as the match made in heaven. In actuality, Savage and Elizabeth had been married since December 1984, and the two would soon divorce the next year in 1992. However, as Savage embraced his new on-screen chapter, a sinister force emerged in the form of Jake the Snake Roberts, now fully embracing his dark side. At the SummerSlam wedding reception, Roberts and his new ally, The Undertaker, crashed the celebration in sinister fashion, hiding a live snake inside a wedding gift. As Elizabeth recoiled in terror upon opening the box, Undertaker struck Savage with the urn while Roberts menaced her with the serpent. Sid Justice intervened, driving them off, but the damage was done. Unable to wrestle due to his WrestleMania 7 retirement, Savage launched a relentless campaign for reinstatement, only to be stonewalled by Federation President Jack Tunney. Then, at a Superstars taping, Roberts escalated the feud, luring Savage into the ring before tying him in the ropes and unleashing his King Cobra, which sank its fangs into Savage's arm. With overwhelming support from the fans, Jack Tunney ultimately reinstated Savage, setting the stage for a showdown with Roberts at this Tuesday in Texas. Savage secured the victory, but the celebration was short-lived, as Roberts viciously delivered 3 post-match DDTs before crossing the ultimate line of slapping Miss Elizabeth. The rivalry raged through the winter, culminating in a decisive clash on an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, where Savage finally put Roberts down for good. Next, Savage found himself in a contentious rivalry with Federation champion Ric Flair, who brazenly claimed to have had a past relationship with Miss Elizabeth, even producing alleged photos as proof. The tension exploded into a title match at WrestleMania 8, where Savage triumphed, capturing his second championship. Behind the scenes, however, his real-life marriage to Elizabeth was unraveling. Their real-life divorce was finalized in September of 1992, with the Federation even issuing a rare public statement acknowledging the split, which was an unusual break from kayfabe at the time. For much of 1992, Savage and his longtime rival, The Ultimate Warrior, who had returned at WrestleMania 8, managed to coexist without conflict. But when Warrior was named the #1 contender for Savage's championship, old tensions reignited, leading to a series of fiery exchanges. Their clash at SummerSlam was originally scripted to see Warrior align with Mr. Perfect, turning heel to win the title and extend the feud with a now babyface Savage. Yet Warrior refused the turn, fearing a collapse in merchandise sales, forcing last-minute changes. Instead, Savage retained the championship via countout after interference from Ric Flair, and Mr. Perfect left him with a damaged knee. Warrior, rather than exploiting the injury, helped a battered Savage to the back in a moment of uneasy sportsmanship. Just weeks later, on a September episode of Primetime Wrestling, Savage lost the championship to Flair after further interference, this time from the rising force of Razor Ramon. Following his title loss, Savage joined forces with Warrior to form the Ultimate Maniacs, backing his partner in a quest to dethrone Flair. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, they challenged Money Inc. for the Tag Team Championship, winning by countout but failing to capture the gold. Originally set to battle Flair and Razor Ramon at Survivor Series, their plans unraveled when Warrior was fired just weeks before the event. In a dramatic twist, Savage recruited Mr. Perfect, Flair's own executive consultant, as his new partner. Though Perfect initially scoffed at the idea, Bobby Heenan's taunts about his fading abilities pushed him to accept. At Survivor Series, the unlikely duo triumphed, defeating Flair and Ramon by disqualification. As Monday Night Raw debuted in January 1993, Savage transitioned into a color commentary role, while still making occasional in-ring appearances. On January 24th, he nearly won the Royal Rumble, finishing as the runner-up to Yokozuna. Later that year, he returned at Survivor Series on November 24th as a last-minute replacement for Mr. Perfect. In early 1994, his feud with Crush escalated after being eliminated by him in the Royal Rumble, culminating in a Falls Count Anywhere victory at WrestleMania 10 on March 20th. His final Federation match took place on September 13, 1994 in Germany, where he teamed with Bret Hart to defeat Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart. By the end of October, his Federation contract expired, paving the way for his move to World Championship Wrestling, where he debuted in December 1994, hinting at his complex history with Hulk Hogan, before ultimately aligning with him at Starrcade. He feuded with Ric Flair after Flair attacked his father, leading to a series of intense matches, including losses at the Great American Bash and a win at Bash at the Beach. Later, Savage rejected Flair's offer to team up and instead joined Hogan, Sting, and Luger to defeat the Dungeon of Doom at Full Brawl, before beating Luger at Halloween Havoc. Savage won his first World Heavyweight Championship at World War III in November of 1995, but lost it to Ric Flair at Starrcade. He regained the title on Nitro, only to lose it again at Super Brawl 6 after Elizabeth betrayed him, siding with Flair. After briefly teaming with Hogan, Savage became a prime target of the newly formed New World Order when Hogan turned on him at Bash at the Beach. He feuded with the faction, culminating in a title loss to Hogan at Halloween Havoc, after which he left the promotion due to contract disputes. Savage returned in January of 1997, claiming he'd been blackballed before aligning with Sting as a free agent. At Super Brawl 7, he betrayed Sting and joined the New World Order, reuniting with Elizabeth and launching a brutal feud with Diamond Dallas Page. After multiple battles, including a Halloween Havoc victory, Savage lost to Lex Luger at Sold Out and again at Super Brawl 8. He then turned on Hogan, won the title from Sting at Spring Stampede with Kevin Nash's help, but lost it to Hogan the next night after Bret Hart's interference. This led Savage to form the Wolfpack with Nash, but knee injuries sidelined him after the Great American Bash. Savage returned in April 1999 with a new look, theme music, and a villainous edge, debuting Gorgeous George as his valet. As the special referee at Spring Stampede, he helped Dallas Page win the title, but later pursued it himself after Kevin Nash's victory at Slamboree. With Sid Vicious's help, Savage won his fourth and final championship at Bash at the Beach, only to lose it to Hogan the next night on Nitro after Nash's interference. Team Madness soon fell apart, leading to a feud with Dennis Rodman, whom Savage defeated at Road Wild. After briefly resurfacing in Nitro to discuss passing the torch, he made his final WCW appearance on Thunder, siding with the Millionaires Club against the New Blood. Then on November 7, 2004, Savage made a surprise return to wrestling at TNA Victory Road, confronting Jeff Jarrett and later leading an attack against the Kings of Wrestling. His final match took place at Turning Point, where he teamed with Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles to defeat Jarrett, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. By now, Savage had been wrestling on a per-date handshake deal rather than a contract. Agent Bill Behrens characterized Randy Savage as a challenging personality, often under the influence and part of a group of troubled wrestlers who gathered at a trailer to drink away their time. According to Behrens, Savage's final wrestling run was marred by dysfunction and disarray, signaling a bitter end to his legendary career in the industry. Needless to say, outside the ring, Savage was equally memorable. His interviews were stream-of-consciousness masterpieces, delivered with an intensity that made every word seem vital, and his gravelly voice was instantly recognizable to millions. He even translated his wrestling fame into mainstream success, becoming the spokesman for Slim Jim with his memorable Snap into a Slim Jim commercials. In the mid to late 90s, Savage made numerous television appearances, including a wrestling-themed episode of Baywatch and guest roles on Walker, Texas Ranger, and Mad About You. His film career began with Ready to Rumble, but his most iconic role came in Spider-Man as Bonesaw McGraw. Savage also ventured into music, releasing his rap album Be a Man in 2003. Perhaps even more noteworthy was his commitment to philanthropy, especially his efforts to support underprivileged children. Savage's relationship with Miss Elizabeth, though tumultuous, remained a defining chapter in his life, and their divorce in 1992 marked the end of an iconic era. Their legacy as wrestling's first power couple would live on, but the heartbreaking loss of Elizabeth in 2003 left a lasting void. In March 2010, Savage also mourned the passing of his father, Angelo, whom he had always regarded as his hero and mentor. Just 2 months later, Savage remarried Barbara Lynn Payne, rekindling a love from the early 1970s, but little did he know that fate had darker turns ahead. On the morning of May 20th, 2011, Savage suffered a fatal heart attack while driving near his home in Seminole, Florida, causing his Jeep Wrangler to crash into a tree. Paramedics found him dead at the scene at age 58, while his wife, who was in the passenger seat, sustained only minor injuries. An autopsy revealed severe coronary artery disease and an enlarged heart, though Savage had never been diagnosed or treated for heart issues. His death was officially attributed to atherosclerotic heart disease. Savage's influence on professional wrestling cannot be overstated. He showed that technical skill and character work could coexist, that intensity didn't have to come at the expense of athleticism. Modern wrestlers still cite him as an influence, and his matches continue to serve as templates for storytelling in the ring. The WWE Hall of Fame finally welcomed him posthumously in 2015, a long overdue recognition of his contributions to the industry. The legacy of the Macho Man extends beyond championships and memorable matches. He represented a perfect storm of athletic ability, character work, and timing, emerging during wrestling's most explosive period of mainstream popularity and helping to define it. His story reminds us that sometimes the brightest stars burn the fastest, but their light continues to illuminate the path for those who follow. From that transcendent moment at Trump Plaza in 1988 to his untimely death in 2011, Randy Savage lived his gimmick with an intensity few could match. He was more than just a wrestler. He was a force of nature who changed the landscape of professional wrestling forever.